thanks again for joining. This is going to be a really cool session. I think you got an awesome preview of what we're doing with what we call Airship from Javi's presentation this morning. Ariana and Emilio are in many ways the brain trust behind this. And in this session, they're going to talk kind of at a couple different altitudes. They're going to talk a little bit about what we've collectively learned at CARTO around what it takes to design location applications for kind of the best user adoption and the best user experience. And they're also going to show a good bit more detail around and talk about Airship, which you saw a couple high-level snippets of from a video standpoint this morning. They can go into all kinds of detail there. And if there's time for questions at the end, there's probably very few questions that they can't answer. So I'm going to just like set that for them right now. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to these guys.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can you? Hello? Hello? Yeah? Okay. There are so many questions that we can't answer, Ian, but thank you for setting up us for that. So thank you so much for coming to this presentation. This is what we're going to talk about. That's me. And it's an honor to be here today. I'm going to be quite honest with you all. This is my first time being a speaker at a conference, so you're seeing a woman in tech giving her first talk, so I'm going to be the best I can. And one thing I wanted to mention is that design for CARTO and for our products has always had a key role since we started. And we try to advocate as much for good design as much as we can. And we've seen so many times how design can either break or make a product, whether in our own or in the applications that are built with them. So hopefully with this talk, you'll be able to get a glimpse into the design process or the design principles that we follow to create our applications and the ones that we recommend our clients and partners to apply to theirs. And you can also take this as a digital product design 101 class, and then we'll see how we will apply that to an actual location intelligence application. And then we'll take a deeper look into Airship, which is this design library that we announced earlier today. So let's get to it. So before we move any forward, I want to get into what actually is good design, what I mean when I say designing better applications. So far from being a subjective matter, good design has a clear purpose, has a clear definition of who it's designed for, meets business needs, users are able to accomplish their tasks, creates happy users, and has a clear success criteria. So with that in mind, and with that out of the way, where do we even start? Should we start developing our interfaces? Should we start creating our maps? And the answer is no. The answer is that we first, before anything else, we have to define our basics. And there could be many more things, but for me, for us in CARTO, there are three main basic stuff that we need to define early on before taking any other decision. The first one is to define your question or your set of questions that you want your map to answer. It's not about points in a map. We've passed that. We've already went through the visualization phase. What we want with location intelligence is for our maps to give us answers about the questions that we have in our companies, in our products. So what I want from you doing this exercise is to spend time on it, spend time on this phase and really think it through, because most of the time you will see that the real interesting questions are much more deeper and complex than the ones you ask originally. So take time through this step. Once you have that question or that set of questions, every decision that you make, every design decision that you make has to be in service of that question. This is very important. I will try to reiterate this as much as I can throughout the session. But this is sort of like if you're going to take anything home from this session, let it be that. Any design decision, any decision at all that you make has to be in favor of your question, of that answer that you want to get out of that app. And also, we've seen so many times that people, and even us, we fall into this as well. We try to extract so many insights, to answer so many stuff out of a single app, and that's rarely a good idea. So what I'm going to ask for you as well here is to just keep it simple. And even if your questions or your set of questions is complex, because it could also happen, to break it into multiple apps or into multiple dashboards, or at least implement it all in phases. The second one is to understand your users. You can build a beautiful map, but if your users don't know how to interact with it, they don't even understand it, or they don't know how to interpret it. Hello? Okay. Wow. Oh my. Okay. So if your users don't know how to understand your map or how to use it, sadly it becomes worthless. So you need to ask yourself, who are your users? When are they going to use your app? What is the motivation behind using your application? Where are they going to use it? Are they going to be in their offices, in a computer, or in the streets in a smartphone? What is their understanding on the matter? So this is all very important questions that you need to have the answer of, to do research before taking any decision, because this will, again, make or break your product. And the last one is to determine your ideal output. You need to really think through if you really need a full-blown location intelligence application at all. Sometimes the best way to represent your information will be even through a static map or just a report. So really think it through, think how your users are going to use your application before deciding exactly what you need. So again, define your questions, understand your users, and determine your ideal output. So then, and only then, you will be able to start thinking about what will be the most effective way to visualize, interact with, and answer your specific questions. So let's get a bit into specifics here. So I know you must have seen all these words all over the internet. I don't know. This is one of the things that we designers like to talk all day. And so, but let's get a bit into it so we can expand on them later on. So UI stands for user interface, and UX stands for user experience. And the thing to understand here is that UI basically means a tool, right? And this tool for location intelligence applications, what it enables is our users to interact with our maps and to access the underlying geographic information beneath them, right? And interaction, on the other hand, is broader than the interface, and it talks about this two-way question-answer, request-result between a human user and an interactive product through a computing device. Okay, so that's like the main difference between an interface and an interaction. I really like this quote from Don Norman that says that humans use interfaces, but they experience interactions. And it is the experience that determines the success of an interactive product. I really like it because it becomes quite clear how intertwined and important both of these concepts are. They're not just buzzwords. They're really important concepts that we need to take care of when designing a product. So let's start with user experience. So I'm just going to read this. An interaction requires the user to employ perceptual, motor, and cognitive abilities as they view, manipulate, and interpret an interactive map. The thing here is that at normal speed, an interaction can happen in a matter of seconds or even just a second. So being able to pinpoint problems in an experience and being able to work on them, it becomes a tricky exercise. So that's why designers employ frameworks that allow us to break apart a single interaction into observable steps or several stages, so we're able to go through them, to pinpoint problems and to work on them. So one of these frameworks are the stages of interaction, also by Don Norman. And these are all the steps, and we're going to go through them with the help of an example. So the first one is forming the goal. So this is what your user is trying to accomplish with your interface, is their motivations behind using your product. And these are high-level tasks that could mean something as analysis, exploration, synthesis, comparison.
So in this case, our user wants to go see Japan. It's in front of a map and wants to go see Japan. The next one is to form the intention. This is the specific objectives that your user is going to execute in order to complete their goals. Okay, so these are low-level tasks. There could be something as identifying map features, comparison of map features, ranking of a set of map features. So map features. And in this case, our user will have to identify one that will help him or her perform that goal. Then we go to specifying an action. This is when we already have a goal, we have our intention, we need to exactly decide what are we going to do, which map feature we're going to use to perform that intention. Then we have to execute the action. Once we execute the action, our interactive product has to give us an updated representation of the map or the app so that we can see that our interaction made an effect on that app, right? So that's where the application needs to apply good feedback. Then our user will need to see that new representation of the map and be able to understand there was a change, right? Perceive that new state. Then, once our user has perceived that new state, sorry, our user has to make sense of it. A way that you can understand this is the completion of the intention. Did this new state represents what I wanted out of what I tried to do when I performed that interaction? And the last part is evaluating the outcome. This step is the completion of the goal, not the intention. And our users will ask ourselves, once we're seeing this new representation of the map and we're making sense out of it, we will compare it with our expected result when we initially started our interaction, and we will have to ask ourselves if this is what we wanted. So as you can see, this is a nice way of breaking apart an interaction into observable stages, and this will help us in seeing problems and working on them. So let's see a few examples of how that looks. So let's say that we have an issue in the first step, and our user thinks that our application doesn't support going and seeing Japan, or our application might not even support that. So one way of fixing this is to perform a needs assessment of our users, of our target user goals, to see what they will want to do with our app and to work on that, or to employ strategies to increase our user expertise or our product's learning curve. Another example is perceiving the system state could have an issue as well. And our user might not be able to understand what happened after performing an interaction. They don't see anything that has changed in the map. So this is where the employment of good feedback comes into play. Our applications have to have really thought through feedback signals that will let our users know that everything that they are doing have an effect and exactly what that effect is, and so to avoid confusion and frustration in our users. Sorry. Now let's go into user interface. So one wise thing here to think about is that we should refrain ourselves from thinking about user interfaces as a set of just buttons and screens in a display, and to think about it as a set of tasks or jobs that have a beginning, a middle, and an end. So that way, when you are designing the actual components of your application, you're thinking about how a user will start performing that action, how he or she will go through it, and how that action will end. So that way, sorry, I need to drink some water. So yeah, that way we'll be able to have a more strength relationship between our user interface and our user experience, and eventually help the final outcome of our projects. Okay, so one of the first concepts that I want to talk about on this step is that not every application or every project needs to be interactive. I know this sounds counterintuitive with what we want in CARTO or in this new paradigm of GIS, but it is true. I mean, we might use interactive apps to get the insight, but maybe for the representation or for sharing that insight with our users, we don't need an interactive map. Maybe we are overcomplicating ourselves. So, why do we make interactive maps at all? The two main reasons for creating an interactive map is to either let our users explore complex data or to tell a story. And one key thing here is that if you're going to let your users explore more data, you can allow for broader interaction, while for telling a story, you might need to constrain that interaction. These maps are usually represented inside an interface or displays. And they are an essential part of the map because that's what allows our users to interact with them and the data beneath it. But another key thing here to remember is that not all interactive maps require the same UI design. I've seen so many applications that decide to have the same type of sidebar, the same type of features, the same type of widgets, like they are repeating themselves, which if they are following a nice example could be a good idea, but that's not always the case. So remember to go back to your basics. Remember to go back to your question, your users, your output, and let that determine what you actually need. Not just copy another great application, and think about what you actually need to decide these kind of things. And for all this process of designing an app, it's quite important to think about this concept of information design, but especially for when designing your user interface is a great thing to remember. And is that every decision that you make has to be in favor of your data, the information that you want to show and how you want to represent it. And we need to make applications that are easy to use, easy to understand, easy to share, to digest, that won't take our user too much cognitive load, and that are uncluttered, that are nice to see. Great applications of all the examples that you might suggest as good applications. They need to be efficient, they need to be elegant, and we need to be careful because we might fall into the other side of the spectrum, and just by adding more features and adding more complexity to our elements, we might fall into the other side and create applications that are cluttered, that are hard to use, that are hard to understand. So let's be mindful about designing our applications, designing our interfaces before starting to do so. So once we know what kind of interaction do we need, if we need it at all, what are our basics, principles behind our application's goal, we can start to outline exactly which components we need. So interface scope stands for the number of elements that our interactive app has, and freedom, interface freedom, stands for how precise they have to be. So the mix of interface scope and interface freedom determines our interface complexity. And much like managing information complexity in cartographic design, managing interface complexity is essential for good application design. The appropriate balance of both has to be determined through user input and evaluation. So try as much as you can to make user research and usability tests as often and early as possible, so you can determine this without starting with the development of your product and putting it out there, so you can get feedback quite early. Okay, so UI design is a highly creative process, and for the creation of unique and cohesive design languages for your interface, for your app in general, you need to work on an iterative set of global design decisions. So I'm going to try to move over this quite fast so we can go into an example and see them in action. So the first one is layout, which is basically the visual arrangement of elements surrounding a web map. For location intelligence applications, the the layout most used is the partial map, because it allows for a greater level of detail, of control and interaction, while still enabling space for other tools for our surrounding interface, right? So this is the one that we mostly recommend, and it can take many forms. We just need a map and the surrounding elements. Navigation. So the navigation is probably one of the most important parts when creating an allocation intelligence tool. It's what allows our users to go through our different features. And it has two cardinal rules. The first one is that our user must always know where they are at any given moment. That's known as orientation, and it can be done by many different things, like highlighting where you are, applying breadcrumbs, many different stuff. And the other one is that our navigation must be consistent. We can't start moving menus around. Our users must know how to go where they want to go at any given moment. So this is a quite important part. And especially for very complex applications, navigation is probably the most important global design decision. And in this part is where we recommend the application of the universal design principle of progressive disclosure. This principle, what it says is that information presented to the user when they are not able to process it is effectively noise. So a way of avoiding that noise or reducing that noise is to only present information that is relevant or that is requested at any given time and nothing more. Everything else should be hidden behind menus, drop-downs, sidebars, you name it, menus, whatever. And once they are requested or once they are relevant in our user's workflow, we will show it, but not before. This is a way of keeping our displays clean, uncluttered, to reduce information overload, and to avoid our users becoming frustrated, confused, or to reduce poor usability. The next one is affordances and visual feedback. These are two very important signals that should be applied in any application, not just allocation intelligence application, but any, and not even digital, even physically. So let's go over these two. So the first one, affordances, are signals about how to interact with the interface or with a tool or with an environment. And visual feedback are signals about what has happened after an interaction with it. So affordances are what will enable your user to understand how do you want them to interact with your application. So you need to be able to implement positive affordances to how do you want your users to interact with it, and negative affordances to how you don't want your user to interact with it. Sorry. On feedback, that's like the way of our applications to be participant on this two-way question-answer kind of interaction with us, with the human user. And it's a way that they can give us information about how we have interacted, what's the outcome of it, or to prompt us with new information that we might need at any given time. So these are two very important, even kind of technical concepts, but that are extremely important, that will condition the final user experience of your product. Typefaces. Typefaces are also one of the main decisions that you need to make for your final application. And one of the key concepts to be mindful of when picking up a typeface for your product is the concept of legibility, which basically says the ability of the reader to distinguish between two characters. And it's not only that they are legible, it's also that they are legible in the concept, in the context in which you will apply them. It's not the same to see a typeface in the map title than is to see it as a tiny number inside a pop-up that we don't want it to stand out, so we're pushing it to the background while making it gray over a white background. So the context really determines how legible a typeface is. So that's another thing that we have to be mindful of. And another thing here that I wanted to mention is that The need to use two typefaces will be quite rare. So I will mostly recommend you to use just one typeface that is legible, that it's also similar to the one that you're using for your base map. And that's it. Iconography. So icons are such a powerful way of compressing information. Humans are much more able to decode messages out of images than out of words. So using icons is a great idea. But the thing is that it also can backfire, because icons with the slightest misconception or with the slightest double meaning can make your product become really poor in user experience and usability. Icons, images have so many different meanings in different cultures that you have to take that into consideration. And that's when we go back to our users. So we share our users on what kind of icons they work for, what kind of icons they understand. So also take that into consideration. Color. So most people think that choosing color involves the designer's taste or their sense of beauty. But actually, picking up colors is quite more hard than we can initially imagine. And it's also so relevant for our final products. A research done by a company called CCI Color found out that humans make a subconscious judgment about person, environments, and products in the first 90 seconds of viewing them. And between the 62% and 90% of those 90 seconds, it's based merely on color. So you can imagine how important a color is then in your final product. So make conscious decisions when picking up your colors, make them work in favor of your data, to don't have double meanings for your targeted audience, because also, again, different cultures apply different meanings to colors. So be careful there. And lastly, we have the concept of accessibility, which says that your application should be usable by people of diverse abilities without a special adaptation or modification. So historically, accessibility in design has been about making our products usable for people with disabilities. But as knowledge in accessibility design has increased, it has also become increasingly clear that this so-said accommodation also benefit every one of us, with or without disabilities. So take a look at going over what these accessibility design things are about, and take the time in the scope of your product, and your planification to apply them, because they are so extremely important. So for example, if we talk about color, the amount of people that their color vision is impaired, the amount of people that are colorblind is so high. I mean, pardon me the expression, but it's a shit ton of people. I mean, so many people. And we need to take that into consideration when designing our colors. If that initial map that I designed, that is using one of our CARTO colors, if we turn it into the most common color visual types, classes are, that's how they're seeing. And especially the one at the bottom is insane how it doesn't seem to be any difference between the different classes. So take it into consideration and make your products accessible for everyone. So with all this into our mind, once you have selected your interface scope, how complex your elements have to be, and once you have your global design decisions, you can start determining exactly how your user interface components look and interact like. So a thing to remember here is that web map elements should have a consistent look across the base map, data, and user interface layers of the map, and fit with the overall page or app design. So let's see all of this through an example, and let's use Vodafone Analytics to see how this applies. So first of all, we have a map area, of course. And this map area, what we can see here is that there is, well, before everything is that we have a partial map, as I said before. We can see that there is a space for the map and a space for the interface. We can also see that there is a nice contrast between what is the map and what is the interface with this use of black and white. We can also see, what else want to say with the base map? We can also see that we have our data layers, and something that is quite clear here is that everything that is interactive besides being in the white space, it also has a red accent color. Everything that is interactive, every button has a red element, which this is one of the examples of a good implementation of affordances. When we want to negatively afford a function, what we did here was to make it gray. So for example, those two elements on the sidebar that are gray, we don't want our users to interact with it because they are not available yet. So we push it into the background using the gray, which doesn't contrast as much with the white as the red does. We also have a map title, and we see that throughout the interface where you're just using one typeface that is of the sans serif class, which also complements the one used on the base map that is also sans serif. We have map metadata, and here try to add at least the cartographer's names, every license that you might have to add, your data sources, and you can put it really small on a corner, or you can link it to an external web page where you have all your license information, but it's important to add it. We also have our menus, which are the enablers, as I said before, of the progressive disclosure principle. So right now, you can see that this map is not showing us too much. But once we start to interact with these menus, we'll start seeing much more data and interactions control for the user to work with the map. As I said, these interactions controls, we'll start seeing more once we interact with it. And these interactions controls is what the user, again, we use to work with the map, and they have to give us proper feedback when we're interacting with them. And for highly complex applications, it is important to add some sort of reset button for the user to go back to the default settings and styling of the map. It will be interesting to add. And so here we see more interactions controls. We also see a legend. A cool thing about this digital mapping is that we can make all these common elements of map creation as legends to be interactive as well. So this legend could also be an interactive control. And we also have supplemental graphs, which is what we call widgets in Builder. And these can also be interactive controls. And we finally have supplemental information that can take the form of embedded text, links, images, videos, you name it. And this is what gives us more context and information of what we're seeing. And as you see below, we see a pop-up there. And another thing to have here into consideration is that when we have small pieces of information to give to the user, it's nice to do it in the form of pop-ups. But if we have a lot of information, it will be wiser to use it through information panes like the one we have on the side. And so we know now that, as with cartographic design, the visual look and feel of an application, it's more than just icing on the cake, right? It's not just about having big and valuable data. It's not just about the analysis we perform on that data to extract information from it, but how we represent that data beyond setting the tone of the entire user experience and improving user satisfaction and improving our product's usability is what really enables an insightful product, because it's not all about having the data and having the information, but it's also how we represent it. So with that in mind, and with everything in mind, and everything that we've known so far about building location intelligence applications, we decided that it would have been a good idea to create a design library to build location intelligence applications. So we're going to see again the video that we showed in early in the morning about Airship, and then after we're going to welcome to the stage Emilio Garcia, which is the head of design of CARTO, to tell us more about it.
Okay. First, I am going to be a bit fast because we don't have a lot of time. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? Yeah, yeah. First, thanks to Ari for this great talk and inspirational. Now you may be wondering what a design library for building location intelligence apps actually means. Okay, we have this claim. CARTO Airship is going to help us to reduce the development design time by providing a customizable library of components that can be generated with a minimal code. Okay. Designers and developers also they are going to create a wide range of styles, interactive widgets, pop-up windows, and many more customized elements that are optimized for use with geospatial data allocation applications. So now let's take a closer look at Airship main characteristics. Okay. The first one is grid and typography. Airship has a 4-pixel grid, which means that all the sizes, spaces, line heights, and everything with a numeric measurement fits in a 4-pixel grid. Airship, as you can see, use Roboto. It's an open source family developed by Google that is recalled for its good legibility in very small sizes. That is something that really we need for this kind of applications. Also, if you take a look the documentation, you can see that we also use Overpass monofont. It's a monospace font that is that we use in some modules, some components that we need to show part of the code. Okay. The other characteristics is the colors. You can see. Airship works with two main principal colors. The first two blues, and a complementary one, the green. Okay. They are fully customizable, so it means that you can adapt it to your brand. It's fully customizable. So okay, and Airship also has a defined the 6 that we have below. 6 colors, a set of colors for typography, user interface, and different functions. For example, success, error, or alerts, or something like that. Okay. And maybe the most important thing and the most is all the components that we have in Airship. Okay. Airship is made of a ready-to-use inventory of components that can go from buttons, tables, through form-element charts to info windows, legends, or widgets. Okay. Airship is atomic design based. It means that you can create your own components really with the atoms and molecules that Airship provides. Okay. If you wish, you can take a look at the GitHub repository. There you will find all the documentation with all the components that is available in Airship. Okay. Airship is made in order to have a functional framework. It needs to be developing code. We have no use for a framework with a lot of components in Sketch, Figma, or any other design tools if there isn't a code that can be used in the digital real world. Okay, so Airship is a straightforward way to create location apps as it's ready-to-use framework developed in React that can be very easily integrated with CARTO.js. Maybe you are asking why we use React. Some people say that is the best decision that we took in the company, and maybe we choose React by 3 main reasons. Okay, the first one is the framework that the most used framework, JavaScript framework. Maybe it's maybe it's because he has a lot of community. And the third one that they told me that I don't talk about that, but don't worry. It's about it's a framework that we think that we have a lot of projection. Okay, so the next steps in CARTO airship is that maybe we are going to work in the next few weeks in doing fixing some issues that we have in responsive view. So we are going to try to do airship mobile friendly. Okay, and also please, if you take a look at the documentation, if you have some feedback, please, it could be very useful for us. Okay, we are now at an alpha stage. Also, the developers told me that please say that we are an alpha stage. So, but now let's take a sneak peek of a location app, create and design with airship. Okay, it's maybe Jorge make a bit of spoiler this morning. Can you change the signal? Yeah. Okay. This is how this is the look and feel that has this application. This application is fully integrated with CARTO.js, and we use all the components that you can see as are available in CARTO in Airship. Okay, so you can you can change the layer selector, you can filter by price. Okay, you can filter by price with a range component. Okay, it works very fast, and also maybe the most one of the most the most important thing is that we can compare between some neighborhood. Okay, and if you see what I say that is fully customizable, we can do something like this. Okay, we are going to create. You can create your own theme. So we were working yesterday in this theme. So you can change the theme of the okay, you can change the theme of the widget. So you can adapt to your brand in a easy way. Okay, and that's all because I think that we don't have a lot of time.